With the world's attention focused on Beijing, China's growing economic engine is on full display. It's a market everyone wants a piece of, and one unlikely middleman is helping American businesses cash in on the boom. American Sidney Rittenberg joined China's Communist Party, only to be jailed for 16 years by Chairman Mao. But instead of shunning the nation, he is now back, playing a key role in building bridges to capitalist China. The BBC's Caroline Hawley has his fascinating story.
Sidney Rittenberg as a GI, drafted into the US Army in 1942. A young idealist, he went to China hoping to be home in South Carolina soon. But just a few years later, he was a communist cadre, here having his own little red book signed by Chairman Mao. Fast forward several decades, and Sidney Rittenberg is back in the US, enjoying the fruits of a lucrative role as bridge builder between China and corporate America. It's a personal journey that mirrors China's own transformation from communism to capitalism. Rewind now to the 1940s and Rittenberg's first encounters with the Chinese communists.
The army was living on 2 meals a day, both porridge, so that the burden on the people wouldn't be too heavy. So I was terribly impressed by these people, really. And I thought, this is the real thing. This is what I was originally attracted to. And I offered to do anything for them I could.
Rittenberg walked for over a month to join the revolutionaries hiding out in the mountains and caves of Yan'an in central China.
I got to Yan'an on a Saturday afternoon, and I talked to a number of the leading people there. And then every Saturday night there was a dance in the party meeting hall. And so they took me to the dance. And the first thing I saw when they opened the door to the hall was this portrait who had stepped down from the wall and was dancing with a little girl. It was Mao. And actually the first thing he said was, "We've heard about you. You've done lots of good things." He said, "If you don't object, I'm going to ask my secretary to invite you to come to my place and spend a day or maybe 2 days just talking to me about America." The only foreign country that really fascinated Mao was America.
Twice Mao reached out to the Americans in messages translated by Rittenberg. Mao didn't want to be dependent on the Soviets and wanted normal relations with the US when the communists came to power. But he was rebuffed by President Roosevelt with, Rittenberg says, profound historical consequences.
We slammed the door in his face. If Roosevelt had offered Mao an alternative to Stalin's model for running the country and developing the economy, that the new regime in China would have been more like Mao's original program, pluralistic economy. It would not have been a sin to be pro-American. And I really think we would not have fought the war in Korea or the war in Vietnam.
And soon, Rittenberg, the communist American, was to become a victim of the new relationship between Stalin and Mao.
Joseph Stalin sent a written message to Mao saying that they had determined I was the China head of an international spy ring, and asking him to arrest me. They were going to send the evidence, which of course they didn't because there wasn't any. So that was 6 years in solitary. First year was in total darkness, and that was very hard. And then that ended because Stalin did something really good. He died. And all those frame-up cases were thrown out, including mine. Chinese leaders were very contrite. Mao apologized personally several times and in public.
But during the Cultural Revolution, Rittenberg was to fall foul of Chairman Mao again. His criticism of what he called slavish obedience to party instructions earned him another 10 years in jail in solitary confinement.
I think essentially the day that he got out was the day that Mao's wife went in. And he heard her in the jail Imagine you're in solitary. You hear this kind of screaming, cackling woman. Many people say she was crazy by then, being thrown into prison. And he recognized her voice and knew by the sound of her voice that he would be free.
There were people I could hear in other cells around me who fell into self-pity. There was one man who I could hear from the guards criticizing him. He would kneel down to the guards and confess his guilt to everything under the sun, everything imaginable. And he later became catatonic. He couldn't eat, he couldn't move, so they led him away. There's two big enemies, self-pity and bitterness. And you have to fight against those every day to keep your head clear. And I was determined I wasn't going to let this ruin my life. Don't let them ruin your life, ever. You know, with whatever you have to work with it. Don't give up.
In my view, he has every reason to hate that system, to hate that country, but he does not. His love of this country, his compassion for the Chinese people is so obvious. So that certainly makes Chinese people, have a tremendous respect for him. And the Chinese leaders also, including current leaders, are his personal friends.
It's a long way from a Chinese prison cell to this. Rittenberg now lives near Seattle with his Chinese wife. His services as a global go-between are in high demand from businesses wanting to cash in on the ever-expanding Chinese economy. And at 87, he's still opening doors in China for a slew of American companies.
If you're still vital, which he is, are you still going to play a vital part of history? And I think that he's doing that. And right now, our history is a history of globalization. And if the story is partly between the United States and China, I would say partly it is. Well, Sidney's playing a very important part of that story.
For a new generation of young Chinese, Rittenberg, or Li Dunbai, his Chinese name, may not be quite the legend he was. But anyone over a certain age knows of the man who was once in China, a household name.
His experience is very similar to Chinese Revolution. He, like Chinese communists, was a very idealistic man, but also his experience changed and he became a very pragmatic man, become a business leader or consultant for business firm. So it's a transition from communist China to capitalist China, also reflects this American figure, also changed his views, his values.
Sidney Rittenberg has personally known every Chinese ruler from Mao to the present leadership, and quite a few American presidents too. No wonder the great and the good seek his advice on where the emerging superpower is heading.
Today they're still talking, both parties are still talking about the strategy set in the early days of the Bush administration that we cannot permit any other nation to grow strong enough to pose a possible challenge to the United States. Who do we think we are? It's one of the facts of life, but these guys still don't see it. The world has already changed, but they don't see it, just like they didn't see it then. There has to be a whole process of transforming the Communist Party into an organization that can carry out democratic management. Is this possible or not? I think the jury is still out.
Rose 是小动物，Rose 是小的送的。